Welcome to College Compass by experts at scholarship.org. For the past 43 years, the staff at the George Snow Scholarship Fund and scholarship.org have dedicated themselves to empowering young people and ensuring that they have access to the resources they need to succeed in their educational journeys. In each episode, we will sit down with experts to provide practical advice that will help students overcome challenges, thrive, and maximize their college experience. My name is Shannon Elwood. I am the Director of Communications for the George Snow Scholarship Fund, but I also bring years of experience working closely with college students throughout their educational journeys. In today's episode, we're diving into the topic of campus involvement, how to find clubs and organizations that match your interests, build a sense of community, and still balance your class schedule. Joining us for the conversation is 2022 Snow Scholar Shoaib Chaudhry. Shoaib is entering his senior year at the University of Florida, where he's pursuing a bachelor's in computer science with a minor in business administration. Throughout his time at the University of Florida, Shoaib has been intentional about getting involved. He served as a University of Florida ambassador and is the co-founder of Florida Tech Pathways, a student-led organization aimed at strengthening student placement in the tech industry by creating a structured recruitment pipeline to top job opportunities. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So first I want to talk about the type of season that we're in right now. You know, it's back to school season. A lot of students are either moving onto their campuses or will be moving onto their campuses very soon. So can you take us back to your first semester when you moved to the University of Florida? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah. Before I get started, I want to say again, it's an honor to be here serving, talking to you and speaking about my experience. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
But looking back at my experience, I started University of Florida during the summer program. So during the summer, it was literally before the fall, and it's when a lot of students are there, and it's really hard to get involved. So I think when I moved to the University of Florida, I moved with not knowing anybody there. My older brother, he had went to the Florida State University. He went to FSU, so it's kind of a rival. And that's actually the university I really wanted to go to all throughout high school. But when time came to apply and get accepted, I ended up going to University of Florida, taking a bet on myself because I wanted to, start from a clear path. And it was a great time. I wasn't that motivated to join student organizations kind of because I was really lost. I really didn't know, the major that I was doing, if I wanted to pursue that, and what organizations should I join. But with time, I've learned a lot, a great bunch, and I've been very intentional as we're going to, discuss in the podcast.
Yeah. So it wasn't your first goal to join student organizations. What got you there?
I think a sense of community. I think my biggest reason to join student organizations was to find people, like-minded people who, share similar interests with me. As I mentioned, I went to University of Florida not knowing a lot of people who went to UF. So being able to find friends who are maybe the same background as me, or maybe, studying the same major, that was really instrumental to me, being motivated to find student organizations and be part of them.
Yeah. And I remember you once telling me that there's different types of organizations. There's ones that you can socialize, that are meant for socializing, and then others that are meant for more work experience, professional growth. So would you say that you started leaning more on the social organizations at first?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, there's so many different types of organizations. In fact, we have around 900 organizations already at the University of Florida.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And then there's cultural, there's social, there is professional, and then there's random organizations as well. For example, there's a cheese club, students gather around the try cheese from the different parts, areas of the world every week. But I started off my journey, being involved in the social organizations because, I really wanted to find friends and find people who are from different backgrounds as me. And I just wanted to maybe find people to hang out with outside of classes. And it wasn't until my sophomore year when I really tried to think about being intentional with the organizations that I wanted to join that would, maybe benefit me in the future, and they're more closely aligned with my major and the space that I really want to be in after I graduate.
Yeah. And so how did you find your clubs? Because I know the first week of classes is typically when they have a fair to show all the organizations on campus. But then outside of that, how else can you find ways to get involved on campus?
Yeah, I think, but I think the biggest thing is the student organizations fairs that they have. They have
Hmm.
these huge fairs with every student organization. I'm planning on attending some of these myself with Florida Tech Pathways. So I think that's a first step to join organizations. But other than that, I think speaking from the University of Florida, and I'm sure like similar universities do the same thing, is when you're going to class, they'll have tabling. Like random student organizations would be like tabling, and they'll ask you questions like, "Hey, are you pre med or are you pre vet? Are you pre-law?" And they just like filter through these people who are walking down, going to the classes, and they were like,
Yeah.
"Hey, join our organization." So I think besides going to these fairs, I think just being open-minded when you walk around campus, you're making new friends, right? Like for the students who are going to be going to college for the first time, and maybe they've left their friends back home and they've gone to different universities. I think one aspect of college that I really appreciate is the fact how open everybody is. I think it's like one of those things when you go to college for the first time, everybody's like, "Hey, my name is this, what's your name? I major in this." So I think being open to those connections and putting your best foot forward to making friends. And I think if somebody doesn't say hello to you, I think you should say hello to them, and you never know who you're going to meet. And from like your mutuals, you'll understand what does what organizations are they looking at, what are they applying to. And I think just getting a sense of where you want to be because of all the resources around you, I think is a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on that topic, I have noticed sometimes it can be hard to get started, especially for people who might be a little bit more introverted. Maybe they feel shy and they are afraid of being rejected, whatever it may be, but they want to get involved. So what advice do you have someone who might be feeling or have for someone who might be feeling that way?
Yeah, I think the first thing I want, like if there's somebody's listening and they feel like that they're introverted and they kind of have like a struggle trying to talk to new people, and then
Yeah.
like the fear of rejection, I think first thing I want you guys to understand is like how like you're not alone, right? Like there's
Yeah.
so many people who are just in the same boat as you. And the first thing I want you guys to realize is that this is totally okay. You're totally fine. It's not the end of the world. But I think one advice I will give is just being open, right? Like as I mentioned, I've met so many people doing things that like just walking around campus and saying hello. And like, if you see somebody saying, tell them you like their shoes, if you like their shoes, I think just being open. And the college is just one of those environments where everybody's like willing to make more friends, especially if you're a freshman or you're a sophomore and, you're in a new place, maybe you left your hometown, and being open to these experiences,
Yeah.
it can really change the way how you can go and be involved in organizations.
Absolutely, right? Because you'll never get the time back. So even if it's scary to jump in, it's worth it because the years will go by very quickly. And
Yeah.
especially, hearing about that cheese club, I'm sad I missed that.
No, definitely. That's coming from a senior who's like, I just feel like I just started college and I'm like already sad that I'm a senior. So
Oh, yeah. So what clubs are you doing this semester?
yeah, I'm heavily involved in Florida Tech Pathways. I'll be serving as a president, so there's a lot of backend that I'm doing for Florida Tech Pathways. Other than that, I'm also involved in the Florida Cicerones, as you mentioned, as serving as a student ambassador for the University of Florida, where I give tours to incoming students. Other than that, I also have like on-campus employment as well as a website developer for one of the offices. So I think these are like my main realm of things that I'm really involved in, and
Yeah.
outside of that, it's just classes.
Yeah, you've got a lot going on.
Yeah, I
But
know.
I'm sure you feel very connected on your campus from it. And
Yeah.
you've made a lot of connections with and made friends through it. So it's very rewarding.
It is.
I do want to ask you, what do you think are some common concerns of first-time college students?
I think outside of the technical stuff about like, figuring out your financial aid and all these things, I think one of the biggest concerns that I see with students coming in,
Mhm.
and that's something I felt as well, was like finding a sense of community, right? Like when you're in college, and especially if you go to a big college, there's so many groups that you can be a part of. And there's, people from diverse backgrounds. And it's like really hard to understand, okay, like what do I really want to do with my time here? Because obviously you have classes, and I suggest everybody, prioritize your classes and, being
Sure.
involved. But I think you also have some leeway time that you wouldn't have otherwise when you're in high school. And I think it's really hard for you to be intentional about what you spend that time doing. Because as we said, like time is going to run out really fast.
Yeah.
I truly, truly believe that college is like the best 4 years. My best 3 years I've actually been in college now. So I think one of the biggest concerns, finding a sense of community. And I think you should be really, intentional with who you choose to spend your time with, because obviously the environment you're in, it literally tells me your future. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to enjoy from this experience, from these 4 years, typically 4 years for most students, and so much to learn from it and soak up. And, there is the connections that you can make, and then there are the professional opportunities that can really propel you forward for a career. So I want
100%.
to ask you, because we've seen this sometimes with our students, I think it's very common for first-time college students you're just learning your new schedule. It's your first time as an adult on your own, going to college. It's very exciting. You are taking on a lot, and sometimes you can overcommit. I want to know if you have any personal experiences with this and if you have any advice on how students can juggle their schedules
Yeah,
or
definitely.
balance.
Yeah, definitely. I would say I've had my experience with this. I've felt myself in situations where I was like, I'm doing too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I need to step back. And I think what I tell like my friends or I tell peers who like come for advice is like, there's two real ways of assessing if you're overcommitting. And one thing is, the first thing I would say is if your sleep schedule is getting affected, I think that's a sign that you're overcommitting. For example, if you feel like you need to pull an all-nighter because you had to study for an exam because during the day you were doing, XYZ, right? If your sleep schedule is being affected, if you're not getting at least 7 hours of sleep, I think that's like a red flag that like maybe you need to like reprioritize your tasks, right? And second, I think is something that's really important that I value a lot is if you cannot carve out like an hour and a half out of your day to do something that you're passionate about, something that's fun, right? I know I can preach a lot about, being, doing your classes, having jobs on campus and
Mm-hmm.
being part of clubs. But at the end of the day, you'll get burnt out really easily if you don't have like an hour during your day where you're like doing something that you really, really like. That could be, different for everybody. You could be going to the gym. It could be playing a sport. It could be as simple as going outside, taking a walk or taking a nap, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you're not taking the time out of your day to just give to yourself something that you really like, that's another, red flag that I would look out. So these two things in mind, if your sleep schedule is good and you can find out like an hour of the day to like dedicate to yourself, I think you're on the right track. But I think some advice that I could give you is time management is like really like a ambiguous term for me because I
Yeah.
think everybody like approaches it very differently.
Mm-hmm.
So how I do is I load up my Google Calendar, right? Whatever calendar you use, whether it's Apple Calendar, Google Calendar, plan out your day, right? Like be really strategic with, okay, this from 12 to 2 p.m. I have class. And right after that, I'm going to have lunch. And I think the more you plan, I don't want you to over plan as well, because you definitely want to be like very open-minded and like kind of like jump ship with new opportunities that come your way. And they will happen at college, especially. But I think trying your best to plan out your day to understand, okay, I'm giving this much time to classes, I'm giving this much time to my extracurriculars, and I'm giving this time to, myself is a key, I think, when it comes to time management.
Yeah, really, look at your entire schedule for the day, where your classes fit in, and then where your free time is. And when you're able to have like a bird's eye view of that, you're able to see where you can pencil in your activities and then that time for sleep and for play, because play is a form of rest.
Yeah.
Also. But yeah, I think that's very important that people remember to take time for themselves.
No, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So is it ever too late to join an organization? Maybe it's mid-semester. What would you say to someone who wants to join but feels like they should have started at the beginning?
Yeah. I don't think it's ever too late to join an organization.
Mm-hmm.
But ideally you would start, in the beginning of the semester, but let's say you couldn't do that. It's definitely okay to join mid semester. And it kind of depends on what type of organization that is. Sometimes
Right.
organization, for you to be a part of organization, you need to apply in the beginning of the semester, right? So like that
Mm-hmm.
probably you cannot do. But in terms of other organizations that you're passionate about, there's so many organizations that they'll post their GBM times on their social media. And then you just go to the GBM and talk to people. And I think it's never really too late to like get involved.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And then moving on to the next question I have for you. You also said that students should be joining organizations they are passionate about, not organizations that they think will look good on a resume. So I'd like you to speak about that.
Yeah, that's something I'm really glad you asked me this question, because that's something I'm
Mm-hmm.
really passionate about. And that's kind of comes from how we view school in high school compared to college, right? And I think it's a common mistake, and I was part of this as well,
Yeah.
was joining, a lot of these organizations on your high school, and you think I'm gonna get the most out of my time, and I'm gonna join all these, and they're gonna look really good on my resume. Bingo word, resume, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit different in college, because I would say that, how you make your story, what you do in college is like literally you. Like, for example, there's so many students in your class who are in your graduating class, but everybody's doing something different, right? Like your major could be so much different than somebody else, right? And I think you crafting your own story with, what organizations you want to be part of, being intentional, if they genuinely make you, want to be there. Like, for example, if you ever feel like, hey, like I have to go to this GPM, it's kind of a thing. It's like, no, maybe you're not doing what you're really passionate about, because it should be, how I view it is like, it should be, I'm excited to like take like an hour off and from studying, go do the GBM or like go do this activity. That's where I know, okay, I'm passionate about this. And like the work that you're doing for school is separate, but the work you're doing for your organization shouldn't feel like work. It should feel like play in a way, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's where you can really assess whether you are, being intentional with what you're doing. And I think it's really important for you to not just join organizations for your resume, because I can understand how it could look good on a resume, but I think in a long-term picture and, pulling out from the bird's eye view, you will most likely like not be really successful in the organization. You won't have the same amount of impact that you would have if you're really passionate about something. So I would say being intentional and about the organization you want to be part of, and if you're really passionate about those, is super, super important.
Yeah, 100%. Because, right, like you work as a college student, you're already limited on time.
Yeah.
And then to stop and spend maybe an hour once a week on this club, maybe more, you're wasting your time on something you don't actually care about just because it looks good. You're not fully committing yourself to it because you don't enjoy it. You're probably not learning as much as you could be if you went to another organization that you were more interested in. Right. So you're limiting yourself.
100%.
And the same with your club members. Like they probably could benefit from having more passionate people in their club. So it's just a win-win for everyone, just to be honest with what is enjoyable for you, and then you can learn how to thrive in that organization.
Yeah, and I would like to add on one more thing. I think if you're doing it for your resume because you think an employer will see that and be like, okay, that looks really good.
Yeah.
I think in an interview sense, somebody can really pick it off really quickly if you're just doing it for your resume compared to if you're really passionate about it. Because when you talk about the things you do, I think it's like translated within your, tone of how passionate you are about this. And like, for example, you can recruit 50 new members, and that's a quantifiable item. But if you're talking to somebody about your organization, right, and you're not passionate, they'll sense it right away. And I think it's like, it's not worthwhile long term.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I was literally on the verge of saying that, or at least coming to the thought of that. But yeah, you can really feel it when someone, at the organization in our scholarship interviews, we can hear when there's passion behind someone's story. So then moving on to your organization, Florida Tech Pathways, right?
Yep.
So tell us how you started that, because I know you're very passionate about this organization.
Yeah. So Florida Tech Pathways, as you mentioned, is an organization that we help basically mentor students, coach them to land in big tech out of University of Florida. And how we do that is through, there's like 4 tracks we have: consulting, product management, software engineering, and tech sales. And how we do that is we have mentors who mentee these freshmen and sophomore students through a 10-week analyst program. And we also have the educational meetings. We also have capstone projects and so much more. The reason why I'm so passionate about this is because I see the firsthand impact that I get to make, right? For example, I've had mentees in the past who have like got to work really closely with, whether it's like working with their resumes, their LinkedIns, their cold emails, or whatever it may be. Being able to see that, I helped them, or I was a little part of their journey, helping them, land in tech, big tech, is super, super fulfilling. And I love giving back. It's one of my biggest thing is, I'm a senior, right? And I have this plethora of experiences and knowledge that I've accumulated for the past 3 years. And I think the best thing for me to do that is obviously use it on myself, but I can't do anything but move it on to, somebody who's just starting college. Because I remember when I went to the University of Florida and I was a freshman, I didn't really have a lot of, people guiding me. And I think part of the reason why I'm super passionate about it is because I want to create something that was not there for me. Right.
Yeah.
And for example, the biggest goal for Tech Pathways is making UF the next, tech school. A lot of my friends that I felt like from Florida, if they're studying computer science technically, right? A lot of them go to different schools like Georgia Tech because it's a great school, great tech school, right? And I think in Florida, we have a great program. And I think if we establish University of Florida as the next tech school, that's like the mission for Tech Pathways.
Yeah. And so how can What makes it a tech school? Is it the connections that you have with employers after graduation?
Yeah, it's credibility, right?
Right.
It's credibility. You know, when companies come to your school to give student employment, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
in terms of an internship or a full time employment, is definitely on credibility. Like they value UF because they trust the professors that they're teaching the students this, right? And then the
Yeah.
students are very locked in a way, right? And I think that's really what differentiates school from school. And I think what we're doing with Florida Tech Pathways is creating an analyst class, creating a class of those kids who are really, really passionate about what they do and who can outwork anybody in the room. And that's what I really look for when we look to students join Tech Pathways.
Yeah. And it feels like a really big undertaking establishing this organization. How long would you say it took you to establish it? And kind of what were some of the main things you had to do to get it off the ground?
Yeah, I think obviously we have the Career Connection Center, which is great. We have a
Mhm.
lot of resources around in the University of Florida that offers, right? But I think what our program is more structured, right?
Okay.
Anybody like I think nowadays you can go on YouTube and learn everything, but how we differentiate ourselves is we make it really structured and we kind of like give assignments to our analysts to go ahead and do that because as I mentioned earlier, the college life is so busy for a student that like you kind of forget to like fix your resume, right? Or like
Yeah.
fix your LinkedIn. It's like kind of
Mhm.
one of those things you just overlook. And I think that's what really differentiates Tech Pathways. And I wouldn't consider that undertaking. I would say like we're working very closely with the alumni. We're working very closely with the companies that end up coming to campus, and
Mhm.
we're basically making their job easier, right?
Yeah.
Because when they come to career fair, right, and there's so many students they have to talk to. What we're doing is we're interviewing these students ourselves, and we're kind of creating a little class ourselves who we trust. And then I think with time, with Florida Tech Pathways gaining credibility, it's just going to be easier and easier from there.
Yeah. It sounds like you're doing some of the work for them and
Yeah.
funneling the students to them.
Yeah.
How did you establish these relationships with recruiters and employers?
Yeah, I think a lot of these relationships that we made was through like our own employment. So every
Okay.
mentor within the organization is a mentor because they've done something. Like
Mhm.
for example, interning at this company or working at this company or having like a connection there, right?
Yeah.
And for example, as I mentioned earlier, I'm super passionate about Tech Pathways, so I really talk about Tech Pathways to a lot of people. And for example, for me, when I just finished up my internship at Deloitte in Virginia, and when I was talking to some of the people there, the Tech Pathways topic just came in the conversation naturally. And I was like super passionate about it. And then they were, really interested in learning about it more. Right.
Yeah.
And we just created like this organic connection. Right. And then when Deloitte will come to campus or other companies will come to campus, they'll know Tech Pathways is something. And it's because it's the credibility is that I was in Tech Pathways and I'm working for the company and what my performance was. So I think it's really organic. We're not like cold approaching companies like, hey, this is us. It's more so organic relationships we were building with people within our team who've had the privilege of working at these companies and like kind of like showcasing our talents and what we have within Florida Tech Pathways.
Yeah. It's great natural growth
Yeah.
that you've seen there. Okay, so for someone on another campus who wants to start their own organization, what advice do you have for them? How can they start their own? Where should they start?
Right. I think the first thing I'll say about starting your own organization would be
Mhm.
genuinely seeing if your campus needs an organization, right?
Okay.
If there's like as we mentioned, if there's a cheese club already at our school, I wouldn't start another cheese club, right?
Yeah.
So you really need to assess the void, assess the gap that what does your organization do that's different than what exists right now, right?
Right.
So for you to really understand what you're doing exactly and having people vouch for you, whether it be
Mhm.
professors, whether it be employers, whether it be whoever, whether it be advisors or coaches, I think that's the first step, for you to build those connections with your advisors, professors, because when you start an organization, you need a professor or a faculty member to kind of sponsor or advise the club. So I think first would be to really understand why, you're starting an organization. And a good rule of thumb to assess if your student organization is going to last is thinking, if I start this organization and when I graduate, will it still be there? That kind of gives you an answer like, hey, are other people also really passionate about the organization like I am? Like, is there a genuine need? So once you've established the need, I think then it's like smooth sailing because you'll get people, maybe it's your friends, maybe it's a network you've created to kind of like be in this idea with you, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to convince a professor, like this is what I'm doing. I would love if you can advise us on this. And then it's just a whole process. I mean, every school does it differently to how you start an organization. But
Mhm.
with I think the biggest goal you should have is really seeing if your campus needs a new organization. Like as I said earlier, University of Florida, we have around 900 organizations already.
Yeah, that's a lot to choose from already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does the future hold for Florida Tech Pathways?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the future, kind of the reason why I'm really passionate about it is because I wanted to create something that like leaves my legacy in a way. And I know this is really cliche, but for people to carry it on over, right? And I've seen so many students in our organization that are really passionate about it, right? And they're like just willing to, they're looking forward to the next semesters when they can take on leadership roles. And I think that's what the future looks like for Tech Pathways, is being a organization that serves our freshmen and sophomore and juniors and helping them land in big tech and essentially establishing UF as the next big tech school. I think that's like my goal, that's Tech Pathways' goal, and that's just what we hope to accomplish.
Yeah, and you'll be graduating soon, and you believe that this organization is going to live on. Yeah. Like you said, you're going to create a legacy with it, and there's always going to be a need for it. Yeah. And by establishing a UF as a tech school, that is checking off that very requirement that you're saying to anyone who wants to establish their own, that there is truly a need for it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think in the future, one more thing that I want to do is, because I think, it's because we started this at UF and, other schools might not have this, is in the future, we might want to work with other schools, whether it be schools within Florida, to help them start their own Tech Pathways program.
That's amazing.
And because we have our own educational meetings, and in the educational meetings, we present slide decks of like classified like information. And then we can share our documents, and we can share like what we essentially teach, or advise how we coach our students, and we can start like in other schools as well, so like more students within Florida in itself can land in big tech.
Yeah, that would be amazing if you could bring it down here to South Florida.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so I want to shift the focus to other campus involvement you've had. So you served as an ambassador for the University of Florida as well. You worked on campus as a website developer. How did you find these positions?
Yeah. So with the student ambassador position, that's called Florida Cicerones, that we're the official student, body presiding over the student body. Okay. We give like tours to the incoming students. We do a lot of work with the alumni. And how I found this opportunity was, we know who Cicerones are, because when you're walking around campus, you'll see a Cicerone given a tour, and then their attire is a little bit different. They were like a white polo shirt with khaki pants or shorts, depending on the weather. It's really like commonly known what, the Cicerones do. And I was really passionate. As I told you, I'm a really, really big Gator fan. I love, all things Gator, whether it's sports, academics, tech. And I really wanted to, be that person given the tours, help answer those questions that maybe my questions hadn't been answered previously when I joined, right? Yeah. And it's really a privilege for me to give tours and answer questions and talk about my experiences at the University of Florida. So I kind of applied spring semester. They do recruitment every spring semester. Around like 700, 800 people usually apply for that position, and they ended up taking like 60, 70 students. So it's like a whole process within a group interview, then like a final interview, and all that whole process. And it's really competitive, I would say. But I was fortunate enough to, be able to, let my passion speak through, me being able to give tours. So that's how I found that opportunity. But as a website developer, it's really funny. It's a really funny story. As in, when I started, I just wanted to get a job on campus, right? Like I just wanted to fill some time of its, job. So I applied for this office, like desk assistant job, right? Okay. And this was freshman year. We're talking freshman year. And I applied to this job, and we interviewed, and it was just like a behavioral interview. And before they told me I got the role, they were like, "Hey, we have a new listing opened up for website developer in our office, and we've seen your resume. It's all technical, right? And would you be able to like interview for this position?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." I ended up interviewing for the technical position, and I just spoke to them about my resume, my experiences, me coming from a tech background, computer science. Wow. Yeah. And then they were like facilitate this new, job for me that like, it's really better because it's technical. It's like sometimes it can be remote as well as it pays a little bit better as well. So I'm super fortunate. So I think the main key takeaway would be like, really pay attention to your resume, because like, I interviewed for this role because my resume had been technical and I've talked about my experiences, everything I've done. They saw that and they were like, let me just interview this kid whose resume is all technical rather than going outside and finding a new one, you know? So I think like the resume part is super important.
Yeah. So when did you create your first resume then? Freshman year, prior to that?
I think my first draft on my resume was when I was applying to colleges.
Oh, nice.
When I was applying for scholarships, and I think I submitted a resume here as well, maybe. But I was applying to so many scholarships and colleges, and most of the colleges don't require for you to have a resume.
Mhm.
Maybe back in my day that wasn't the case. I don't know about now, but that was like my first draft, and I think I remember when my older brother had his resume in college. I just got his resume in a Word doc, scraped all his like name and all his information, and just put my stuff in there. But my resume has been like a long journey. It's been so many like cycles of me updating it. Actually, before coming here, like yesterday, I was updating my resume with my internship from this summer as well. So it's always like a process of renewing your resume and like adding on to it from your experiences you're gathering over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important for students to hear that, as soon as they can start a resume, they should, even if they feel like they don't have a lot to put on it, they should at least get it started and put what they can on there. And then you can always go in and adjust and update it just to have something.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think starting it as early as possible you can
Yeah.
is such a good idea because any job you want to apply for, anything, your resume. I tell people your resume is like a like you on a paper, right?
Yeah.
Your resume
Snapshot.
your snapshot. You should convey like who you are. And I know it's really hard to do with a resume, but like you should really try to convey like your experiences and your background within education and what are you involved in. And I also have like an interest section too, because I have like interest about like, I'm interested in pickleball and music because, when you apply for a job and, if they have your resume in front of you, it's a good starting to, it's like a good talking point. They'll be like, oh, you like pickleball? I'll play pickleball too. And it's like you start off that conversation being lighthearted and you're like, okay, you establish a connection. And I think that goes a long way too. It's like one of the secrets that I have.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to point out because I've seen that in interviews before where someone may just mention something casually and it allows the interviewer to want them to elaborate and feel like they know the candidate a little bit better, just feel more, it's more personable, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, just letting, not that this should become a podcast about resume writing,
Yeah.
but showing your personal side and your interests, and again, it goes back to your passions, what you're passionate about, and doing things that you're passionate about.
Exactly.
People are going to connect with you much better.
100%.
do that.
100%.
Yeah. So you're nearing the end of your college journey.
Yep.
What is one piece of advice that you would give a first year college student, someone who's moving into college right now?
God.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on for 15 minutes and all the
Mhm.
advice, but to make it concise, and I think I've used this term so much within this podcast as well, as be open,
Mhm.
right? I see a lot of students going into college and like they have a really good sense of what they want, right? They know exactly what major they're gonna do, and that's really, really great, right? But I've seen so many people, so many students go to college and like just recalculate whatever they want to do because of the experiences they had, right?
Yeah.
And if that's totally okay. It's totally okay for you to change your major. I think there's a big stigma about changing your major. Like it kind of like shows that you don't know what you're doing, but I think that's totally okay. I think changing your major is okay. And that's one piece of advice I would say. If you chose a major when you apply to college and you feel that you're not passionate about it anymore and you think you want to change your major, please do it.
Yeah.
Because like that's totally okay.
It's a high percentage of students that do
Yeah.
change it. And again, to say passion again,
Yeah.
You need to be going into a field that you're truly passionate about
Yeah.
because you're going to be spending a lifetime working in it. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely change your major if you feel like what you're currently in is not the right path for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than that, going outside and talking to new people. Like I there's so many stories of how I met somebody, and it's just changed my view, right? Like for example, I'll share a quick story. I don't know if you have time.
Sure. Yeah.
Freshman year, I was working at my local Dunkin',
Okay.
right? I was a cashier at my local Dunkin'. And I was working on the drive-through, and there's a customer who came who was wearing a FSU shirt, and he was wearing like the Seminoles mascot logo.
Mhm.
And he asked me for a straw, I remember, and I just made a joke about his school. I just made a simple joke because I go to UF and we're rivals. And then he just we started this conversation, and turns out he was a senior vice president of recruitment for Citizens Bank for a really high prestigious position, and he ended up getting on LinkedIn, and we chatted a lot, and he had so many connections within like with the recruiters of different companies, and he basically gave me their contacts. He was like, hey, reach out to them, let them know I told you to reach out. And I did that so much. And like, that was one of the things where I realized, like, just because you have a positive, like attitude, whatever you're doing, right? Whether it be you're working as like a part-time job, maybe on school, just have a positive, outlook of the world, be nice to people, and you never really know who you're going to bump into. And I truly, truly, really believe that. And that's something that I really preach, because you never know who you're going to bump into, and you never know like what they can do for you or what you could do for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, like you said, be open, if they're not smiling at you, be the first one to smile at
Yeah,
them. And you never know what could come of it.
100%.
There's a lot of great opportunities, and you can be the first one to
Yeah,
initiate those opportunities for yourself.
100%. I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And so I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and giving this advice. I think your insights are invaluable to students as they start their first semester, or they're returning for their fall semester. But thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you so much for having me. And if anybody's watching who's Snow Scholar, if they want to reach out to me via LinkedIn with my Gmail, my LinkedIn is Mohammed Shoaib Chaudhry. Reach out. I would love to set up some time, chat, learn about you guys, learn about all the people who are within this amazing scholarship of fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
In closing, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in to College Compass by experts at scholarship.org. In our next episode, we're diving into the world of internships, how to find them, land them, and make the most of the experience. So stay tuned. And in the meantime, you can learn more about us by visiting scholarship.org. You can find us on Instagram and LinkedIn at George Snow Scholarship Fund, and on Facebook, TikTok, and X at Snow Scholarship. And as always, we look forward to guiding you through your educational journey. Thank you.